To holiday is a privilege that so very many people over centuries have not had the opportunity to experience. Feast days and public holidays was about as much as your average person would get. Travel was a luxury, as far as we're aware, that only the very wealthy could afford. And to take time off as a peasant would have simply been unheard of. I always like to try and imagine what it would be like to live in the past. I've long had a dream of time travelling back to the medieval or Tudor age to see how people really lived. Last week, we holidayed in Little Haven, a quaint, tiny village on the Pembrokeshire coast in Wales. There was one single track road in and one single track road out. It was very quiet, with no shops and very few tourists. We stayed in a little cottage only 200 yards from the sea. The beach was sandy and clean, and the sea was as blue as the Mediterranean. Quite literally, a little haven hidden on the west coast of Great Britain. The week was filled with exploring the coast and the countryside, wading through overgrown paths, squinting in the bright sun, and stopping every 100 yards to gawp at the ever-changing view unfolding in front of our eyes. I could really feel that tight, deep feeling in my chest, almost like you want to cry, because what you see in front of you is so incomprehensibly breathtaking. The magnitude of nature really is a wonderful tonic for a tired mind. We visited Skomer Island, where thousands and thousands of puffins filled the sky and the sea. A colony that is thriving. We skirted around the island on a tiny boat, spotting lazy seals sunbathing and razorbills darting in and out of the puffins. And of course, there was the friendly seagull, who hopped onto the boat as we came back to shore, whose friendliness, I'm sure, was more to do with the scraps of bread the crew gave him regularly, rather than the fact he actually liked us. We visited lots of castles. One of my favourite things in the whole world is to explore old castle ruins, trying to imagine the smells, the sounds, the chatter, the way people would have spoken differently, smelled different, maybe had different mannerisms, the different sounds of musical instruments, the different tastes of food and ale, the serving staff hurriedly waiting on the lords, hiding behind curtains ready for their next instruction. We very often get caught up in what the lords and ladies of the past were doing. Political games, romances, the extravagant clothing and rituals. I am equally as fascinated at how the serving staff would have lived. They would spend their whole life toiling for somebody else's existence, possibly never experiencing many days off, let alone holidays. If they knew of the concept of a holiday, would they have wanted one? I often wonder if sometimes our own frustrations are due to knowing what we could have rather than what we actually have? Is there a happiness in ignorance? We have a lot of luxuries clearly displayed to us via social media, television, and adverts. Companies tell us we could have all this if only we have X amount of money, which requires getting a good job, which requires good education, good contacts, and quite often a lot of luck. We are told we can have all these things if only we work hard enough for it. Inevitably, very often this creates stress and ill health. And this is all so that those companies can make more money themselves. What if we didn't know these material items and holidays existed? I like to think we'd be a lot happier in ourselves. Realising that you don't have to have the luxuries. Realising that a lot of what you see on social media and adverts is a construct to make you feel like you want something in order to make somebody else richer. As a peasant with very little opportunity for social mobility, would they have aspired to be like the lords? Or would they have happily accepted their lot in society and been contentedly ignorant? I wonder what you think.
What's happened here is you've had a little glimpse into all the thoughts that go through my head every single time I visit anywhere. I like to sleep quite a lot, and my husband always wonders why, and I honestly think that it's because my brain is thinking all the time, completely overanalyzing most things, and it makes you quite tired. And then I go to sleep and I dream, and then my dreams are so busy and full of fantasy characters and stories. My brain never gets a rest. I absolutely love medieval art and culture, and Tudor art and Tudor culture, and I can't really explain why. It's quite ugly, a lot of it, but in its ugliness, it's so beautiful and so telling of the time, and it just transports you to a completely different world. I love both the traditional medieval art as well as the Renaissance fantasy art of the medieval times. It's just so dreamy. It just it makes you feel so warm and comfortable inside. Speaking of which, isn't everything just more romantic with candles? Now, I can't really explain why I love medieval and Tudor history quite so much. I have a weird theory in my head that it's something to do with my DNA. I took one of those DNA tests a couple of years ago now, and I was about 90% British, Irish, Scottish and Welsh. There's no surprise there. And about 8% Belarus, which was a nice little surprise. This genetic test analyses your DNA from over centuries. So I have a weird theory in my mind, similar to the genetic memory theory, that my ancestors lived in Tudor times, medieval times in this country, and that's why I find some comfort, because maybe it's familiar to my genes. Now, this genetic memory theory is poo-pooed quite a lot in the modern psychology world. It basically explains that memories can be passed down through genes. So, for example, this would explain why somebody who has never had any bad experiences with snakes, or has never had any bad associations with snakes or negative associations, can suddenly develop a phobia. It's a very loose theory, and it's very hypothetical. There was a study done in America where they proved that worms pass genetic memories on to the new offspring. I think this is quite interesting. I'm not saying I'm a worm, but nonetheless, there may be some comparison there. And I think there is just so much that we don't know about the world or ourselves. People thought the world was flat until we could prove otherwise, so perhaps there is something to genetic memories, which might explain why I love medieval and Tudor history so much. It just feels like such a familiar place for me to be. I got to explore so many castles in Wales. There seems to be a castle nearly in every town. There are hundreds of them, and it was so quiet, and I just got to run around feeling the cold stone and just completely and utterly immersing myself in this different world. We went into one of the gift shops where they were playing this beautiful medieval music. Unfortunately, they didn't have any of the CDs left in stock, so the first thing I did when I got home is I bought this CD and I play it in my car on the way to work, and I'm there again. I'm there smelling the rosemary and the bay leaves and hearing the chatter in the kitchens and the dancing in the court. I'm getting so over the top with this, but I really, really love it. If, like me, you're interested in medieval history, there is a really good YouTube channel that I follow called Medieval Madness. And they're just 10 to 15 minute little segments of concise medieval history. Some of the things in there will surprise you, and it's full of medieval art and imagery, and the whole video, every single video is just so comforting to me, and I love watching them before I go to bed. So back to what I was talking about today. I'm still very aware that this video is made from a point of privilege. Some of us live in a country where we have essentially a choice of how much we want to work, because we have social security systems and we have benefit systems and support for the disabled. We're very, very lucky. And throughout making this video, I felt a little bit awkward at times, because I thought there are people in this world living in countries who don't have a choice of how much they work, because they're feeding themselves literally hand to mouth. They have very little opportunities to have a day off. They probably will never go on holiday. And this makes me feel really sad. But we can't help where we're born. So I think if you can have a break, have a holiday, it's a wonderful thing. So I really would love to hear your opinions on what I've talked about in this video today. If you think I'm right, if you think I'm wrong, any opinion is completely valid, and I love listening to what you've got to say. And please, as always, take care.